All right, you're good to go.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Maggie Ullman, and I will, in the stead of our chair, lead our call or meeting until he joins us. Today is the February 2nd, 2026 Environmental and Energy Stewardship Committee of Buncombe County. And we have a fun agenda, but first, let's start with approval of the agenda, which was sent around. Do I have a motion to approve and a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion approves. I will also make a statement, as we do as practice, of conflict of interest in accordance with the bylaws adopted by the Environment and Energy Stewardship Committee. Subcommittee members shall not vote on any matter where the outcome of the matter being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct, substantial, or readily identifiable financial impact on the member, or any matter involving the person with whom the member has a close familial, business, or other associated relationship. Is there any items of business on this agenda for which a member of the subcommittee is requesting recusal? Karen?
Voting on anything?
Are we voting on anything today? No, this is all informational, right? So therefore, we would have no conflicts of interest. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item 2, which is approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Are there any comments or questions of those, or do I have a motion to approve?
Motion approved. Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Great. We also start with public comment, but I don't see any members of the public today. So, should any members come, maybe we'll move it to the end. Otherwise, we'll just. Oh, are there any online?
Not any comments. We do have a couple participants jumping in and out.
Great. Well, welcome participants far away in the internet world. Okay, then we will move rapidly into this agenda. We're almost halfway done to number 4, which is the text amendment process and priorities, which Nate's going to pick us on.
How are y'all doing today? For those that don't know me, my name is Nathan Pennington, Planning Director here at Buncombe County. My understanding is you would like an update on the many things that are occurring in the broad field of planning and development these days. I can tell you that after we adopted the comprehensive plan a couple of years ago, we had anticipated to go right into a slew of text amendments as laid out in the comprehensive plan. We spent quite a bit of time on a very controversial topic that ended up not getting very far, and that topic was short-term rentals. Then we had Hurricane Helene happen. We are still contending with all the fallout with Hurricane Helene. One thing that comes to mind as one of the certified floodplain managers is all things flood. This is where we have spent a lot of time. In fact, I have right in front of me some flood ordinance text amendments that we're currently working on that deal largely with life safety implications in the floodway. We plan to take this first batch of amendments in the flood ordinance to the planning board public meeting next month, and then on to the commissioners after that, so possibly April. And this is setting us up for a long-term goal of joining the community rating system. Maggie, this is familiar to you because Asheville is a member of the community rating system. And what that means is if you adopt higher standards, you can enjoy some discounts for flood insurance policy holders across the unincorporated Buncombe County. Each municipality is a separate member of the National Flood Insurance Program, so what we do here applies to unincorporated Buncombe County. That being said, some of the other things that we are currently working on that are taking up a significant amount of time is the Swannanoa Small Area Plan. We have a pedestrian plan. We also have a parks plan. We have a lot of plans that we're working on from a long-range perspective, and that's taking up quite a bit of time in the planning world. One of the things that has been mentioned to me that I understand that you all are studying or interested in are specific environmental and energy goals. One of those that's been mentioned to me specifically is the potential for electric vehicle charging, electric vehicle or anything related to potential for the storage of electricity. What I can say to that is we have had good success in Buncombe County with incentivizing rather than requiring. The reason I bring that up is we have what's called a community-oriented development program where we incentivize density based on either good environmental design and affordable housing. In fact, two of the items in here currently in the code for the community-oriented development program speak to alternative energy sources and participation in programs like the Energy Star program. This is a points-driven, menu-based development ordinance. One of the things that we are contending with now on a state level, the state passed Senate Bill 382. It's called the down zoning law, and a lot of us are scared to death of it because no one fully knows what it is. We've talked to our lobbyist about it, talked to our legal department about it, and many of the planning departments across the state are electing to not do anything in zoning that would probably run afoul and land us in court or be against the grain of this particular bill. And until we know more, what we've elected to do is move on to, unlike Asheville, we don't have a UDO. We have a code of ordinances. That actually works in our favor because now we can pivot to some of our life safety ordinance specifically. A lot of them are in need of updates. That's why we're moving ahead with our flood ordinance updates. We are moving ahead with looking at stormwater, E911 addressing. The erosion control ordinance is largely driven by the state, but we do have a watershed. We have a watershed in the Ivy area. There's two other watersheds in City of Asheville, owns Petrie and Burnett Reservoir. But you guys are at an advantage because you own all the property around those two reservoirs. Ivy's a little different because Weaverville's water source comes from the Ivy River, and that is a very broad township. And so we have a new state model ordinance and we need to update ours as well. There's also one thing to think about too is, and this is where you guys are just gonna have to advise me on where your head is. But maybe you can kind of bring me up to speed on, because I don't regularly attend this subcommittee on a couple of things you're looking at doing. But for now, we are probably not gonna really do much in the zoning ordinance until we get further clarification or who blinks first or who goes to court first. The General Assembly makes some kind of change to Senate Bill 382. That's what I have prepared for you all. Happy to take any questions that you have.
So Senate Bill 382 did pass, and it is law now.
Session law.
Okay.
It's
So you're-
160D-601B.
Thank you.
Not that you asked.
I just got so
had to say
impressed.
something.
Good contribution. And so did I understand you there at the end to say that you're not looking at really proceeding with the text amendments that we thought would be coming after the comp plan around zoning because of this?
Yes, we've talked to the lobbyist, the school government's advising communities to be very careful. But I think there's plenty of other work and work that actually impacts environmental, like the things you guys are looking at. Specifically flood, stormwater, erosion control, watershed. So that's where we're sort of pivoting to until we get further clarification on additional things that we can do. Because there's a lot we need to do in the zoning ordinance. It's just right now we're kind of on hold.
Nate, can you talk, you'll be at the briefing in March. Can you talk about the scope of what you'll talk about at that meeting?
Sure. So the briefing in March to the commissioners will be an updated sort of version. I've shown you all before, we call them the buckets of things to do, and it'll provide you an updated snapshot of those buckets and what they look like. I will be speaking specifically to this matter at a broader scale, more elaborate, with some updated slides at that time.
And just to underscore what Nate said, the down zone bill certainly has implications for zoning text amendments, but there's other areas where we still have latitude to move forward, and Nate alluded to some of those, stormwater, erosion control, things like that. So we'll talk about that more explicitly.
Can you talk about it a little bit more today, like around that, like what is it that you're around the watershed, stormwater,
Okay, so let's take, for instance, a number of our ordinances that are not contained within the zoning ordinance. They are old-fashioned, they're outdated, they are desperate need of being updated. The watershed ordinance came into play in 1998. It's based off a state model ordinance. It's very cumbersome. It's very difficult to understand sometimes. The state passed a new model ordinance. It's still difficult to understand. We need to right size it for us specifically. We can adopt higher standards in the watershed. That's a good thing. But we need to make them customized for Buncombe County and the mountains, because when you adopt a state model ordinance, it's mountains, Piedmont, coastal. Well, that's great for like the Goose, Tar River Basin and places like that, but it doesn't speak to some of the dynamics. Barnersville is one of the hardest hit areas of Moline. So we need to think about rural and urban levels of service and how those look differently, and perhaps apply a different filter on those in the particular areas of Barnersville. Because even in that Ivy watershed, there's differences in the geography and the topography in those areas as well. The stormwater ordinance was passed at a very different time. It was passed as a response to development boom 1.0. What I mean by that is all the development that preceded the Great Recession. So if you think about that, I think we're at a point now, and at the time, there wasn't as much development out in the county. The city was booming at that time. Well, now it's reversed. Most of the development is now occurring in unincorporated Buncombe County, former ETJ, even in our more rural areas. And as we continue to urbanize and more people continue to move here, we get the friction. And you all hear it as elected officials. And we need to look at that and apply different standards. Again, does it make sense to apply the same standard in a more urbanized former ETJ area as you would apply in Jupiter? Probably not. We need to also look at the impacts that it plays on some of our other goals in terms of housing specifically. So the flood ordinance, it probably makes a lot more sense of the things we're doing, because I've spoken at length with what we're doing there. Not a lot of people think of E911 addressing, but it's super ultra important. For instance, how many rhododendron lanes and mountain lanes do we have? Duplicate road names are terrible. It definitely needs to be updated. I found a weird thing in the animal control ordinance the other day that says specific only to the city of Asheville. I couldn't even tell you why that's even in our code of ordinances. So it's things like that that get neglected and forgotten about. And that's what we're pivoting our attention to, because they need attention. And it's not just because of the downzoning, but these are real world environmental implications.
And one thing I would add is maybe describe kind of some of what needs to get addressed. The business of actually moving from knowing what needs to get addressed to like actual text amendments that have been vetted and socialized with the impacted communities. That's a process. And so we need to talk about how that, as that comes up, how we prioritize that in light of the other plans that Dave mentioned earlier, such as Swannanoa, other small area plans, because reality is like we can't do all the things at the same time, and so we need to make sure that we're prioritizing this piece, which is foundational comp plan text amendments, which we're well on our way to getting started with pre.
Well, I certainly do hear a lot about the watershed and stormwater, so I'm fully supportive of us getting started with those, 'cause that's certainly on people's minds, as well as the floodplain.
Right, so developers will have one set of complaints, but once the developer leaves, the residents will have a different set of complaints. Planning is often in the middle of that. And so how do we get to a better, more comfortable place? I would like to report to you all, just as a note, free market. The reason I say free market is one of the things that used to be heavily regulated when it was first coming out. Emerging technologies are always interesting. At first, they're fear-based. We don't know what they are. AI, data centers. When cell towers first came out, oh my God, can't have that near me. I'm gonna get brain cancer and die. But everybody uses cell phones now. the free
Not
market.
everybody, actually.
Maybe
Got
that's
some
another.
folks that say much that don't.
But the technology and the market is doing a pretty good job at self-regulation now. I would like to report to you all that we do see a number of permits coming our way, of voluntary electrical permits to install EV charging facilities. We're seeing a lot more at shopping centers and places like that. I certainly think that's something we can look at in the future. I'd like to look at it maybe from more of an incentive perspective rather than a regulation. We kind of think of planning as do no harm. I certainly wouldn't want to put a regulation on an affordable housing development or an apartment complex that's putting units on the ground, because the immediate concern you'll hear from them is you're adding additional costs and you're driving up housing and you say you want to support housing. So how do we fine tune that? And that's why I continue to use the word let's incentivize or think about ways to make it, give them something for when they give us something to meet our goals.
Since you mentioned incentives, I was reading this book over the weekend. It's really why we under-prepare for disasters. Out of the Wharton Business School, it's actually interested in if anybody wants a little light reading.
You can tell us the title.
Oh,
Ostrich
The
paradox.
Ostrich Paradox.
It's very
Have y'all read it?
In the sand.
But at the end, they were talking about, they really break it down of, why, and they actually speak about within flood areas and all that. So it's really interesting for me to look at that and think about some of the challenges with it and getting people to adopt various policies. And for us as elected leaders, but also like for you with planning and then for the community. But one of the things that struck me here at the end, they were talking about incentives in California around earthquakes and trying to get people to build their housing, be more prepared with that. And they mentioned one of the ways that they did provide incentives was with the real estate transfer tax. And they somehow used that, they gave them a transfer tax rebate to encourage home buyers to retrofit newly purchased homes. And that was one way they encouraged and provided the incentive of getting people to upgrade. And I just thought it's one example in here, and it just kind of struck me of the ways for us to be creative with incentives to help people to adopt the things that we need them to adopt going forward. Whether that's around the emergency preparedness, whether that's around our solar goals as a county, or what have you.
Just think this, we have to think twice as hard as California because we're not a home rule state. So we fall under that Dillon's rule state. And so we have to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze that beat until we get all the juice out. I wish we were a home rule state a lot of times because it certainly would give us a lot more latitude to do things. But
I have some questions about the current incentive structure you have. It sounded like it was for energy stuff, so you mentioned Energy Star. Is that the for density bonuses, or to what end is the incentive? Okay, so for density bonuses, and I'd love to see some data on the utilization of those incentives. I know that we've looked into our incentive schema and they just aren't really getting used because the ask for the effort is just not matched. So like you get 2 points if you spend $15,000 on solar. It's just not enough of an incentive to get where they're going. So I'd love to see kind of a report on utilization at some point of how have these incentives being used, and if not, perhaps there needs to, I'd like to look into, is it really influencing market decisions for folks, or is there some type of update that might be worthwhile?
well, I can give you actual real world examples, and I can tell you we've won a national award and spoke at Harvard on this matter. So the community oriented development program, if you go out to Swananoa and you go to the East Haven development, which Mountain Housing did, they basically got double density. They were able to get almost 100 units on a very small piece of land. We have amenities, we're on a transportation corridor. We did something that I was told will never happen out in the county. That means sidewalks, crosswalks, bus shelter, access to a grocery store. They have grills, they have amenities, they don't just get vanilla boxes. And then we're seeing that replicated, and it's now being utilized. First it was Mountain Housing, Then the Villas of Swananoa, you can actually visit these sites, their units on the ground. We have another one coming our way, it's LDG, it's gonna be on the 70 corridor. I do anticipate further urbanization of that corridor, which makes sense. It has the utilities there. This whole program is predicated on affordable housing, development of transportation corridors, development where you have water and sewer, public transportation. That's the basis of this program. I don't see any reason why we can't grow it, and it's been successful.
Yeah, I would love to kind of see the report of how many people have utilized the energy focus points and just kind of understand if those components of the program are used. So that was one bucket of questions. The other was debris flows and landslides and steep slope ordinance and stuff. So hearing you talk about looking at flood ordinance stuff, I feel like that's fantastic. Stormwater, that's fantastic. And then I just know, just from talking to a couple constituents in the county, that they've been really concerned about people are allowed to build on debris flows. And I don't really know a lot more than that, but it seems like this is the time to ask, like, does that fit in? Probably not the flood side of things, like where does that fit into things? Because I know debris flows and landslides were a really major impact to many people in Helene, so curious, where does that fit in, or is it not kind of in the buckets that you're anticipating?
Now let's talk about that. I'm a little bit of a different planning director than your traditional planning director. I'm an environmental planner. So that's why I have the flood designation, but I also have a lot of experience with steep slope protected ridge, Blue Ridge Parkway overlay, and specifically debris flows. One of the things that's taken a significant amount of my time lately is the review of all properties that are coming to us through the hazard mitigation grant program. The scariest properties that are coming our way are those that are in our steep slope overlays and debris flow pathways. From a historic perspective, Buncombe County and Asheville did something, and we were pioneers in this area. In fact, when I worked at Asheville coming on board in 2006, after the first development went into the Great Recession, we adopted, it was almost in tandem that Asheville and Buncombe County adopted steep slope regulations. Your regulations look slightly different because you have a lot lower elevations in the city than we do out in the county. Ours actually had to be a lot more comprehensive. The first thing we did, and we were fortunate at the time on the planning board, is we had Bernie Kessel, one of the foremost geotechnical engineers. Unfortunately, he passed. His company's still alive and well, but he was instrumental. We worked directly with the North Carolina Geological Survey, and we used a lot of the data that is publicly available. We've mapped debris flow pathways, which were the basis for the steep slope overlay and the protected ridge. If you go to GIS and you start with debris flow pathways, let's talk about what they are and the relationship. How much more time do I have? This is stuff I can talk about all day.
Well, keep going, this is important.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So debris flow pathways, you'll find 3 sets of colors on the legend, okay? There's known, historic, and potential. They're based on real science, they're based on historical data, they're based on the interface of the steepness of the slope as it relates specifically to the individual water courses, the folds of the mountain, and how all those interplay. When you get hypersaturation of water on your steepest slopes, that causes the colluvial soils and the unstable soils to start to interact with each other, and then you get those flows that start to happen. Unfortunately, with Helene, we also had the interplay of rotational wind and forward wind. So when you think about rotational wind, that's what most people think about in a tropical storm. That's the winds rotating around. And then you get the forward speed, and that's like rotating wind with a punch in the face. We unfortunately had both. What that did was, as the soils became hypersaturated, it started knocking down the trees. Those added to the debris flows. What I'm happy to report is that our work in the steep slope and protected ridge overlays lined up scarily close to all those debris flow pathways. In fact, a lot of debris flow pathways are covered by the overlay. The problem is this: we have a lot of old housing stock. County didn't get zoning until 2009, and so all the people that suffered the worst damages built in the worst possible places.
And they did it well before the ordinance.
Yes, what I like to say is, you wanna build next to a babbling brook? Not a good idea. That's your worst enemy. The problem is this moving forward. We are certainly prepared, and this is one annoying thing. We probably should look at separating out steep slope and protected ridge out of the zoning ordinance and put it in an environmental ordinance that's separate from the zoning ordinance, because we have some other general assembly items that might cause pain there. But we do have properties that are fully located in debris flow pathways.
And they're just grandfathered in fundamentally.
It would be very difficult to pass a regulation on debris flow pathway. It might have to be more of a public awareness campaign, but we are gonna study it. Now, the homes that were built post steep slope or protected ridge ordinance fared a lot better, and here's why. Ours is actually more restrictive than yours. We require initial geotechnical engineering analysis. They build.
If they're in the overlay,
Correct.
so do you ban in the overlay or it's
No.
additional requirements?
Additional requirements.
Is there precedent in other places to ban? in
No, you don't
overlay?
want to go down that road, or you start getting into regulatory takings, and that's gonna end us up in federal court. So we have to be very careful there. But what we do is we do a follow-up geotechnical report that basically says they abided by the initial report. You guys focus more on the zone A and zone B, you do an initial geotechnical engineering analysis. I would recommend you might want to look at a follow-up geotechnical analysis as well. Again, you don't have near the hazards in the city.
Yeah, I mean, we had almost, we didn't really experience a debris flow or landslide issue in the city from Helene. So if we didn't get it then, I'm just curious for the county, because as I hear, yeah, this is just, it did hit a lot of folks.
So do you, let me ask you this, Nate, because you associated this with zoning, and there's parts of our county, there's quite a bit of our county that is open use, so are they still having to meet these requirements as of so anywhere, anywhere, okay, I just wanted, so everywhere that has the overlays has to meet these standards?
That's correct. The only reason I mentioned zoning
Okay,
is the area of the code where it's housed is in the zoning ordinance.
okay,
And I'm worried about that because the General Assembly has passed some laws related to bona fide ag. We've talked about this, that then impact areas in steep slopes, so there's nothing to prevent, say, someone that wants to farm a slope with a farm license. Anyway, it's a problem, but
so if you pull this out of the zoning, have it as standalone, then we're better able to uphold those standards?
potentially, these are kind of things that have to be run through a land use attorney and studied at greater lengths, but it is something that we definitely are studying. But keep in mind too, on a 1,000-year event, no matter what you do, you're gonna have significant damages there. And that's the hardest thing for me as a professional planner, because I've actually been blamed and had a microphone stuck in my face, you should have done more, and there's nothing worse than that, you know?
And we all should have done more, because we've had climate change is causing shit forever.
So looking at the steep slope, where we are currently with our steep slope and our protected ridge, do you feel that we need to increase the standards based on where we are currently?
I think we need to actually dive deeper into the debris flow pathway specifically.
Learn and explore.
Yes, and figure out, so okay, and here's what's so tricky about even, if you look at the, so you're on 40, you're headed to Black Mountain, and you look at that beautiful mountain range to the south, that's one of the worst offenders. And like the Blue Ridge Assembly, for instance. So the bottom part of the Blue Ridge Assembly is fully out of the overlay. All that's historic debris flow. And the some of the worst damages actually they go to the valley floor. Heron Creek, prime example. You build, oh my God, this is flat area, this is a great place to build. It's actually not. It's Grovemont neighborhood. The calls I was getting after the storm were, my yard is now full of river cobbles. Well, let's talk about why. E.W. Grove wasn't really thinking about all the different streams and the impacts when we did that. Sure, it's a historic master plan community. You're building on historic stream river beds. That's why your yard is full of cobbles. So it's complicated, it's difficult work, and I don't know what it looks like yet.
I think, as I said, Nate's gonna be back in March to talk about next steps on the comp plan. This is one piece of a very big puzzle, and honestly, there's foundational pieces that we still need to address first. And that's a part of what Nate will communicate at that point. You know, we want to talk about this stuff, it's really interesting, we gotta get to it. We still have these basic pieces that we haven't touched yet, and that we need to move forward for a variety of reasons, including downzoning legislation. But we'll talk about
I think he had a question.
So moving back out disasters towards more routine stormwater flows. You talked about the tension between, or differences between what the developers put in place and what the homeowners actually. I think there's a second piece of that, is that in my observation, the homeowners will often damage what the developers put in place as required. They'll dump stuff into the drainages, they will channelize the drainages, they'll do all kinds of things with the best of intentions. I don't know about the legalities here, but I wonder if there's a way to encourage, incentivize, require whatever, the developers for the new neighborhoods who are having homeowners associations, which most of them do now, to include provisions in those covenants about not dumping or changing things dealing with the stormwater drainage.
I'm glad you brought that up because I deal with that every day. Prime example, someone builds a smaller scale subdivision and they utilize swales, drainage ditches that eventually get to a detention or retention pond. Have a guy fill one in. So what we do have as a safeguard to that is what's called an operation and maintenance agreement. That operation and maintenance agreement's legal documents recorded with the Register of Deeds and it holds the homeowners association accountable for that. So that's the safeguard we put in place. The county, unlike the city, we don't maintain any infrastructure. So private roads or NCDOT roads, NCDOT has their own hydraulics unit. Eventually it gets into some of their drainages. But many of these subdivisions, as you alluded to, that's how we enforce that, is their operation and maintenance agreement.
But does it actually go into the covenants which the homeowners receive and read? Okay.
Sure does. It's in tandem to that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in an older neighborhood. I'm not actually vice president of my homeowners association. So I think about these things a bit more now.
Are you in the county?
Yes, in the Leicester area.
Okay.
So I'm in an older one. It doesn't have all that. And I don't know if there's any ways to get revisions. That's sort of going backwards. But I think in the future with new neighborhoods, that would help.
Yeah, yours.
Okay.
Yeah, you're.
I do it by example with my house, and actually it's worked well with the brothers. But there's some people who they're old school in thinking.
I have been cussed upside one side, downside the other over examples just like that. My neighbor has done this, you're not doing enough about it, I'm calling the governor. So.
And it comes and many people here know that it comes to politics, and politics is compromise. You pick battles. But if it comes from above, that's different. If it's built in from the beginning, that's different.
Nate, if there's any other questions, I know Nate's got to run, but could you at minimum speak to the flood amendments that are coming before the planning board, just general scope, what's included?
Right. It's going to take us a while to join the community rating system. It's a big lift. What we are focusing on first is lessons learned from Helene, pain points that we've experienced as floodplain managers, specifically the floodway. And we all know the floodway is the riskiest area. It's the area that contains the water. It's the area where it will always flood, even in just teeny tiny events, minimum downpours. Some of the things that have been allowed in the floodway in the past, and we've saw loss of life, are RVs. Habitation in the floodway, as we saw in Texas, camp there, is ultra dangerous. Now, it doesn't help also that FEMA allows certain things to occur in the floodway. It doesn't mean our community has to allow it. We can adopt higher standards. Having worked in a coastal community, the flooding is different. You have surge there. I would venture to say that riverine and mountain complex flooding is some of the most dangerous flooding that can occur. You're channelized, you're canyonized, and that's where you get the dynamic flows that occur and that people die. So we are working to basically not allow anything in the floodway. Don't want to see RVs. If you got, let me give you an example of one.
Like nothing new, as opposed to planned retreat.
Correct. So we already have a standard, it's a higher standard, it says no new habitable structures in the floodway.
We already have that.
We already have that.
Floodway as opposed to the floodplain.
That's correct,
Right.
that's correct. The flood fringe, 100-year, that's a different story, we can talk about that. But right now, we're focusing on cleaning up the floodway. One of the things I want to give you a real world example on, and I worked in the city of Ashland, I always thought it was a horrible idea as a floodplain manager. There's Mana Food Bank. So Mana Food Bank was fully located in the floodway. They did an addition years ago in what's called the conveyance or flood shadow. I'm not going to get into the calculus on this. We're going to get deep into like scientific calculations, but what that means is it was studied in the model, so they were allowed to put an addition in the floodway. Now, when I say that, it doesn't mean you build it at grade. You still have to meet your elevation standards. You have to provide a flood study. We don't need to be encouraging bad behavior. We are removing that option to do any development in a flood conveyance shadow. No more RVs. That's something
And you don't think that you're gonna run into issues with the downzoning law?
a flood ordinance is not part of the zoning ordinance. That is,
Your flood ordinance is not part of those.
that's why you all ran into and had to do an emergency amendment. You had a weird
Yeah,
section
yeah.
that was,
So, okay,
so
okay.
right now, the idea is to expand the definition section, restrict and clarify uses in the floodway. Talked about the conveyance shadow. We're clarifying the repetitive loss definition, letter of map change definition, substantial improvement definition, temporary storage. We get a lot of things that are just show up. Like for instance, I had a shed business that just, I don't have any permits on that. And all those sheds are great floatable missiles. So are cargo containers. So we need to really tighten up like anchoring and placement of these things that are floatables, because as we all know, I've had people that have survived the flood only to get hit by a missile and then cause severe damage.
Yeah.
So that's,
we're gonna restrict that storage in the floodway.
yes, we are.
So that's for new homes. What about replacement homes? Because I was at a Big Ivy the other day, and they're just putting all these new homes right along the same old stream. Yes, there's one that's at a confluence. It's been there for probably 3 or 4 months, a brand new home at a confluence right where it's surrounded by debris. I can't believe someone would do it. Farther up, there's someone who's put like 3 or 4 right by their stream.
So
And they're brand new.
keep in mind, not all streams are covered by the special flood hazard area. So if it's not in the special flood hazard area, the flood ordinance does not apply.
This is Ivy Creek, which.
I understand.
is crazy.
When you get into the far reaches, you start going from full detail, limited detail, and no special flood hazard area at all. So I'd have to look at that specifically, and I will tell you that we do have a number of code enforcement cases out there. This could, if you want to provide me that information, I can get one of the floodplain managers to look at it.
Upstream from the community center.
Okay, it could potentially not be in the special flood hazard area.
Makes you wonder if when was the special flood hazard area map?
We joined in 1980, but keep in mind, every mapping cycle creates changes.
These are FEMA maps.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
The flood insurance rate maps to be
Okay.
specific.
Nate, are we redoing those right now?
So we are in the process of a new mapping cycle.
Yeah.
It's gonna take about 2 to 3 years, Buncombe County. The beauty of our state is that we are a state coordinating agency with FEMA. That means I get to work directly with the state, and the state is in the driver's seat of drawing the new maps in coordination with FEMA. That is a blessing. So what that means is Buncombe County will be visiting the municipalities, including the city of Asheville, when those new maps come out. It's a full process, but I know you see things out there and you're like, oh my God, how do they do this? It's all predicated on the maps.
Is Buncombe County looking at or considering what protections you might wanna consider that are out of the floodway and in the floodplain to
Yes.
go broader than that?
Yes, we have a higher standard already in the 100-year 2-foot freeboard. We have the same standard in Asheville.
Yeah, we do.
So we will
I
be,
think we're gonna look at that.
the new state model ordinance is coming out. So think of it this way. It's a beautiful time to align when we get new maps with the new state model ordinance.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if the new state model ordinance, I think, is gonna recommend a 4-foot freeboard.
In the 100-year.
Now, I also think we need to take it a step forward. Now, I have to do this through the CRS program, but I think it's time to start putting a regulation forward in the 500 year. Ingalls and Swananoa was 800 feet away from the 500, the line of the 500 year special flood hazard area. They still took 2 feet. Now, keep in mind, this isn't just about flooding. There's other dynamics.
Totally, I mean, like, where is your developable land in your county? And so if you go, there's a lot of dynamic
Yeah.
things that need to be.
But the reason I like to use Swananoa is old infrastructure. So what happened in Swananoa that made what's called the backwater effect, which is why the floodplain is so great in that area, is debris dam number 1, it's Whitson Ave. Starts backwatering.
Yeah.
Debris dam number 2, it's Riverwood. Tremendous backwater effect in that area. So it's not just about, people think of water flood. Nope. It's when you start adding in all those debris flows coming together, all the floatables, all the missiles, and that's what that's what's so dangerous about riverine flooding.
And the geology to get further west of Swananoa, it just, the river, like, there is less river plain and
The
it goes
bends.
into a channelized area, and so it's just more.
So for example, some of the worst damages we saw were right there at the East Asheville exit. So that water is going through those bends, it's screaming through there, it's not abiding by the bends, it says, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and it took out a tremendous swath. As you know, I'm talking root bar, I'm talking about that.
Utility, gas station,
All of
BRQ restaurants, yeah.
And one clarification question, when you were talking about floodway, I understood you to say that development was already not allowed in that. Is that correct? I thought that's what you said, but then like when Bob asked that question, then I thought, well, did I misunderstand?
You didn't misunderstand. So we had, Helene took care of a lot of the inappropriate development and the floodways is gone.
How we do, that's the question.
Right, so no new habitable structures in the floodway, we have that. But then you start getting into, say you had you have an existing home, you're in the floodway. This is why it's so important to get out of the EOC and get into the field ASAP. The work a floodplain manager has to do is an enhanced inspection. So in the doldrums, or in the dark days, as I like to call them at the EOC, I'm calling Nancy Watford at the city. We're getting all of our field staff out there. We're doing what's called specific inspections in the special flood hazard area. And the reason why is because substantial damage, substantial improvement. Once you cross the threshold of 50% of damage of market value, you're gonna be held to, you gotta come into compliance with the flood ordinance. So it's not as easy as just black and white, you can't do this. It's very nuanced.
But in the floodway, you already say no new construction.
No new habitable structures. What that
Commercial could go in there?
Commercial's still gonna be considered habitable.
Okay.
We just want to really hammer home on, there's one sentence, no new habitable structures.
Okay.
Let's make that a paragraph.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so
then,
no, conceptually, even though the sentence, you would like to have more definition, at the big picture, nothing new in the floodway.
including
we have-
temporary structures as well.
Right,
That's,
so you need to look at the uses, which makes, and we're looking at that too, like we had a propane tank company.
oh, we got Holstein gas,
Yeah,
every single one of those
There's
things.
a lot of uses that we can be much more explicit, even if they aren't habitable. And then there's still gonna be people grandfathered in, and if they do a renovation over 50%, they have to meet code, and they won't be able to, and that's your floodway. And then the flood plain. I'm also noticing we're like at an hour. I could go like 4 more hours on this topic. I think it's really important. I wonder if in honoring that we have other agenda items, kind of a question is, would we want another presentation on a certain thing to get really into the weeds? Is this even the committee for some of that? I would think when it comes to flood mitigation and environmental committee would be appropriate, but I'm not sure if you have like a planning
I think there's,
commissioner committee or whatever. I just kind of a curiosity, or we can just keep going. I just want to check in with everybody because I really don't spend a lot of time.
Well, I would like to get Nate moving, because we do have budget, Nate has other ideas, yeah. But, you know, there is a process that needs to go through, alluded to it multiple times, sharing with commission what's next in terms of text amendments and studying these areas. And have to remind us that like the planning board is a key player in anything that we do. So there is a process for reviewing that. I think we can certainly bring items for discussion, but I want to respect like the role that they play in ensuring that these text amendments are done properly and not helpful.
So the question I want to get out of this, that I think we probably all get a lot, is, we touched on this a little bit, but just to sum it up, the timing for new restrictions in the floodway and in the 100 and 500 year floodplain, when will commission do voting?
you're gonna get your first dose in April.
April, okay?
So that's,
For decision making or for
yeah,
information?
yeah, we're gonna pass these flood, this is critical, this is mission critical.
Good.
And Nate, you won't wait till the new flood map comes out to institute it, or will you institute it and then have the new flood maps?
So here's, the next phases are where we have to be very careful with our alignment. And it's not just our alignment, but there's not many, floodplain managers, we call ourselves floodies. We're a small group, and we all talk. And I have floodies in Asheville, and we have a rep on the state board. I used to be on the state board. We're a small knit community. What we want to be careful is not to just go start adopting a bunch of different things and have a ton of misalignment, or else you're going to make me have a heart attack in my seat. I may not be around for long.
Well, thanks for putting it bluntly.
You would have loved this conversation.
Oh, yeah, I see Nate's
It was all
there.
zoning stuff.
Let's just work out, it's only an hour. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a process where other appropriate committees are gonna be engaged in this. Is there anything from this committee's purview that we would wanna hear more about, like the energy incentives and their performance, or looking at additional energy incentives, or we just feel like we're hearing that there's a big wave of text amendments coming and you guys will be in the loop in other committee areas?
Is there a big wave of text amendments?
There is April.
I took no part.
So we'll be-
Okay.
There's a plan to talk about that wave
Uh,
of text amendments and the
Okay.
need to focus on working on the text amendments. And so
And prioritizing
we need to prioritize getting that work done,
if you all want to.
yes.
Full support.
Yes, let's prioritize getting that work.
Yes, which means focusing Nate on that work
Understood.
and resources on that work.
So it is really useful, I think, then to be in this committee to hear this committee's opinion that these are really high priorities, and that as you're prioritizing workload, that there's a real appetite to dig into the complexity. As a citizen appointee to this, I share that curious.
That's what I think we hear a lot out in the community. It's one of the main reasons I ran to be on the county commission, to help get this sorted out. Excited about progress.
Thank you, Nate.
So as it makes sense, come on back.
Product criteria, we're telling you.
Yeah.
Feel like
I am pro text amendment.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Get your
I
pen.
have you actually throw it
No
in.
more zoning, we're gonna
Yeah.
amend it to get rid of
Yeah.
zoning.
In really restrictive, Senate Bill 382, 382, I think it is, allow, we can flood restrictions, flood 382 text amendments are okay. Not
Yeah.
down zoning. So we're good.
Because it's a separate. We'll fill it. Okay,
I wasn't worried about that to begin with, but now,
we
now
are.
I don't have to.
Yeah. Okay,
I could spend more time just on
would you
382.
like to baton take or?
Oh, sure.
Great, so we're moving on to planning commissioners.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Don't want you to have a heart
Appreciate it.
attack.
Yeah, sure.
Pretty in your heart.
He's never gonna answer my call. No.
Yeah.
Oh, he loves this.
I know, yeah.
He does, he can talk.
We're bloodies.
Yeah, we're one of you buddies.
I don't want to be bloody.
Okay. Battery storage, I've heard. What's
I'm next.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Next, 2 different times. We're going back to back. So we're gonna talk about battery storage.
How long has the health department battery been up and running?
I'm gonna show you.
You got to show me cool.
Yeah,
Make sure this is working.
all right. It's been a little while. We talked to you guys about these projects when we were first implementing them. So it's been a little while. They're installed and they've been up and running for a little while. So we wanted to come back and talk to you a little bit about what we've seen so far and what we feel like are some pretty strong benefits that we've seen from these sort of pilot battery storage projects that we've done. So Health and Human Services building, and which is the forklift picture on the right there, and the Public Safety Training Center. I think these 2 projects are really cool because even though they are essentially the exact same battery, they're the same manufacturer, the same size, everything about them is the same. They're installed in 2 different types of facilities, and so they do 2 different types of things. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit because I think it's kind of cool. It shows you a couple of different use cases for how these things actually work. So the top one there is the 40 Cox Avenue.
Yeah, the lights.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah, for sure. So that building is on a time of use rate structure, right? So time of use is exactly what it sounds like. Your utility cost is different based on the time of day, right? So what the utility company does in the case of time of use, generally speaking, is that you have like a peak period. In the winter, it changes, right? So in the winter, it's from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. In the spring and summer, they change that from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., right? So what this battery does, and you can see it in the sort of pink there, is that battery discharges starting at 6 a.m., right? So when that peak cost comes up for us, the battery is discharging and putting its energy back into the building to reduce the amount that we're paying for utility costs in that peak time. When you see that blue line drop below 0, that's when the battery is recharging. That, if you look at the time, starts at 11 o'clock because that's the discount rate, right? At 11 a.m., the price goes back down, so the battery charges back up. So that's what a battery can do during a time of use rate structure. And that's what 40 Cox looks like. The Public Safety Training Center is not on a time of use rate structure. It's on a pretty standard, I think, medium general service.
Yeah.
So what it's doing is just shaving peak. It's like charging and discharging constantly throughout the day, right? So as at any given point, the HVAC kicks on because it's starting to get a little warm in here, electricity costs would go up so that the battery discharges right in that moment, sort of in real time. And then it calms back down, starts charging again. And it does this just back and forth throughout the day. What are the results of that, right? So what do those 2 different things actually accomplish? So what we're doing in here, in terms of avoiding cost, and I apologize, this is kind of small. So Parker, to your point, if you look at the graph on the left, the battery was installed in April, right, last year. And what we have seen since the point at which it was installed is that we're lowering the sort of per unit cost of electricity, right? And again, that's because it's deploying during the most expensive time of day. So the per unit cost of electricity you're paying at that building has come down. On the right, because the Public Safety Training Center is a different rate structure, what we're doing is not so much lowering that per kilowatt unit cost, we're getting our demand charges lower because our overall demand has come down. So if you see when we installed the battery there, which was in May, it's kind of like flattened out. If you look at the orange, it's flattened out our demand charges. So we're saving money in both instances, but just in a different way, right? So batteries can be used in multiple ways. These two were, as you can see, we did this on purpose, right? This was an intentional pilot, sort of like test both of these things out and do them in different ways. Both of which have been very effective in doing what we thought they would do. The economics are kind of awesome, but I'll admit fully that part of that's because they were paid for by a grant, is half, right? The budget for both of these projects was $150K, about half of that was paid for through an ECBG grant that we received. It's an energy efficiency block grant. We also expect, because these were deployed before they started gutting the IRA stuff, that we'll get direct pay incentives for these projects as well. So we're filing an additional $45,000 tax credit, probably in the next couple of months now into the new tax year.
That shouldn't matter though, right? Because they didn't get rid of the battery.
Not
Part of the
entirely,
ITC.
not entirely. And both of these combined credits should make the payback on these projects 2 years, maybe even less. So it's been a very effective pilot for us to show that battery projects can, again, without the incentives, right? Without tax credits, without the grant funding, we're probably looking at more like the 5 to 6 year payback range, which still for an energy project of this nature is pretty darn solid, to be honest. So we expect these batteries to be operational and running for a minimum of a decade, because that's their warranty period. It's 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So well beyond, the payback period, whether we got the grant or not. These are cost-effective projects.
So you think the payback, if you were to buy a FIOC compliant battery today and install it, would be about 3 to 4 years? Like, what would that be?
Say that again?
If you bought a FIOC compliant battery today without the grant, what do you think the payback would be?
Probably 5.
Still 5, okay.
5-ish years. I'd have to run the numbers, but
On this building, is that what you're asking, or any building?
Any building.
every building is a bit of a unicorn, so I can't speak to just any
Sure.
building. Consumption is different, patterns are different, the jail uses 1 million kilowatt hours, it's a different animal. These particular buildings were chosen because they were good candidates. Not every building is gonna be exactly the same, because the use case for a building is slightly different too. The jail, for example, is a 24/7, high-intensity building all the time. Whereas a library, it's 95, so it's, yeah.
So a cheap designed application would be better for the jail rather than arbitrage.
Say that one more time. I
Peak
apologize.
demand reduction for a battery from jail.
Yeah, you
more
wanna shape
effective than
demand for
arbitrage.
sure. Yeah. You wanna shape demand for sure at a place like the jail. So to say that we could get a 5-year payback on any project, I'm not willing to say that. But I think a lot of our facilities, if you maybe exclude some of the outliers, we're confident that these are cost-effective projects. There's more to it than that. We're gonna talk about that more later.
And the payback's one part, but then you're just making money after that. You're just saving money after.
You're just saving money.
So do you all have a mechanism to maintain your utility budgets so that any future savings can be used for capital reinvestment, like a revolving fund?
I like that you're asking that question, but let me put a pin in that, because I think we can talk about that. I got 2 presentations today, and that's a really relevant question to my second.
Yeah, I mean, you're actually starting to really make money on the investments you're doing lots of
Yeah, well, again, the term making money is one I want to That's.
Oh, it's cash.
And as energy raises electricity prices and puts the cost on the taxpayers.
Everything becomes more
Always-
cost effective the more they raise their
Yeah,
rates.
yeah.
Which, well, again,
Yeah, okay.
I wanna put a pin in that.
Energy
because I-
revolving fund, future
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah. So I wanna talk about upcoming projects.
Oh, I did have one question on the batteries.
Please,
If the power goes out,
these are not resilience
that's not
projects.
that thing, okay.
These are not resilience projects.
Great,
We're
okay.
gonna talk more about resilience
Yeah,
projects too. Those two specific projects were not designed that way at all. They were designed to save us money, and that's all they did. So the three upcoming projects I wanted to just put on your radar are Big Ivy, 35 Woodfin, and East Asheville Library. That is not to say that those are the only projects that we're trying to, move forward on or get funding for or do any of these things. But those are three that we have been active in seeking external funding for and have actually received some funding to start the process. And I want to be clear, the end goal for these three particular projects is resiliency, right? Is resiliency, it's maximizing renewables, it's doing all the things, right? I want to do all the things in these buildings. I want solar, I want storage, I want generators, I want microgrid controllers, I want all of it, right? Like, in a perfect world, these are the things that I want for every building we have. However, I do not have enough money to do all those things at all these buildings yet. But what I have received up to this point is funding to start the process, right? It's funding for, and I'll go through each individual one, but we've gone through the process and Tim's been involved with me on this for over a year now. When Helene happened and, everything went a little crazy there and all of our budgets got frozen and everybody said, hey, let's stop spending money for a little while, let's figure this out. What little money I did have, I went to Tim and I said, all I want to do right now is start lining these things up because I know all of these federal resources and all of these things are going to be happening and I don't want to be sitting on the sidelines when the money does come. I want to have shovel-ready things. So we've, over the last year, been doing a lot of work with engineers to design what these projects are going to look like should funding become available, right? And now that at least some funding has become available, we're starting that process. So for Big Ivy, again, I want all the things, but what we've gotten funded, and again, we just have a funding agreement at this point, we're not moving forward or anything yet, is solar and battery storage at Big Ivy, right? What I want is solar, storage, generator, microgrid, controller, the whole bit, but what I have money for coming up is solar and storage, right? So we're gonna be installing 38 kW DC solar, a 60 kilowatt battery. That is gonna be done, there's already a contract in place for Sugar Hollow. McKim and Creed was our design engineer, and the funder is a group called Solar Equity. They're actually a student group out of Chapel Hill. And they are sort of in their fundraising process right now. Their big fundraising push comes in the spring this year. So we're under contract to do the project, but the funding will be raised over the next 3 to 6 months.
Entirely by them? Funded entirely by them?
With the exception of a few $1,000s.
This amount is funded by them.
The solar and the
The
battery
solar and the battery is funded, but we
is
still
gonna be
need
funded by
funding.
Solar Equity. It's
Okay,
about $110,000 altogether. But
Who would benefit from the battery ITC? Is that us or?
that's a good
Or is
question.
it paid?
It would go back to them if we're able to file and get it. We're able to file and get it. I'm
Go back to
not,
solar equity, yeah.
yeah, because they're paying for it in full.
Yeah,
So if we're able to get a tax credit on it, it's only fair since they covered 100% of the cost that they could get the NTC back.
Yeah.
But we're working actually on an MOU to sort of fine tune that language and make sure that everybody's in agreement on it. But it's essentially 100% funded by them. There will be a few $1,000s that aren't covered, but it's not very nominal. So they're working on the fundraising for that. We've also got applications in for other funding sources like HMGP and others to add more storage because we want to add more. We want to add a generator, we want to control systems, do all the things. But that's what we can pay for today, right? That's what we're doing.
this is great news. I was out there last week. I don't, Well, as of last week, I don't think they were aware of this.
I mean, they're aware that they got the grant, they're the ones that told me about it.
Oh, they did tell you about this grant specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe they were thinking about it in a different
Very
context,
possible.
a conversation.
But
Okay,
yeah, they were the ones who applied for it.
I'm sorry, what?
They were the ones who applied for the fund.
Okay. Maybe because we were talking about a generator as well, and this isn't the generator at that part. Okay. But do they know that we have applied for the hazard mitigation grant funding for the generator? Okay. There's been some changes, so.
There there was a change in leadership for the
Yeah.
community center
Yeah.
shortly after Helene, I feel like. And you know, honestly, they were not there for a while, like that whole place had to get rebuilt. And so, you know, I think we're still.
It's great seeing it and being in there now, and they're very excited, and they're having their food pantry and
It's a-
3 days a week.
It's a wonderful place and I think has the potential to serve an even bigger role in the community out there. So yeah, we're excited about Big Ivy. I think it's great.
Good.
35 Woodfin, again, we want all the things, but what we have funding for today is an ECBG grant to add 180 kilowatt hour battery storage system at 35 Woodfin, which is of course right next door. We're looking at, that's already at probably 60% design. We're gonna be finalizing those designs here fairly shortly with the goal of having that battery installed by the end of the year.
So you already applied for interconnection?
No, haven't applied for interconnection yet. No, we're still, like I said, we're about 60% of the way in design at this point. We just, actually, there's a contract probably on your desk to finish those out. To finish those designs out, and then we'll go out to bid and do the whole process. We don't have a contractor yet, so they'll be the ones that file the interconnection process. And hopefully, maybe there's a big energy battery incentive by then.
Yeah, should be, actually.
Yes, I know, that's why I said it.
It was approved in South Carolina yesterday.
Oh, cool.
Fantastic.
Congrats.
So that's 35 Woodfin. Again, long-term, we want to add additional solar, we want to add the control system, we want to do all the things. But what we have money for today is the battery, and we've applied for other things as well. So we'll move forward as funding becomes available to do more at that facility. East Asheville Library, we were actually out at East Asheville Library on Tuesday, doing a site visit. We've been selected as a site through the DEQ grant that went to Land of Sky. And essentially it's the same thing. There's already solar on East Asheville Library, so this would be to add a battery. You have a question?
Which DEQ grant program?
So they got a $5 million DEQ grant to do
The microgrid?
the microgrid.
So this will be a resilient home.
This will be, when it's all said and done, yes. All of these are resilience projects. Again, we had the funding to do up to a certain point, and we're hoping to get funding to go all the way, basically. But we've got some money, so why not get some work done? But this would essentially, again, it would just be adding the battery. Because there's not enough funding to add as much battery storage as we sort of originally planned, we're going back and doing an updated design to do what we have money to do. So that process is, again, it's underway. We just did our site visit with the contractor on, that contractor, Rhino Renewables, which is a local solar company. We met with them on Tuesday, again, trying to get this project completed by the end of the calendar year. That's the goal for the grant, is to get that finished.
So are we
again.
applying for,
No,
are we applying for the extra funding we need for all of these through the HM?
there are, yes, I have applications in for these three and lots more.
And lots more. What's our ETA expected on that? Are we still in?
I have
We
no
have
idea.
no idea.
I wish I had a better answer for that. What I can tell you is that we submitted initial, letters of interest. Then they asked us to submit applications, preliminary applications. And now they have asked us to submit full applications, all of which are due by the 27th. The ones that I've put together, again, we have lots of other departments doing lots and lots of other stuff. The ones that are like the redundant power projects that kind of fall under my purview, those are done. I've submitted those applications. Now it's just, it sits in state EM. So North Carolina Emergency Management reviews them, approves them or not, asks questions, whatever. Once they have given us their thumbs up, they send that to FEMA. And FEMA gives final approval, and then we'll figure out whether or not we get the full funding or partial funding or what happens from there.
Unknown.
With the HMGP, we've seen more movement on the acquisition side.
Yes.
So this side has kind of been, as Jeremiah, moving kind of slow.
Yeah, the infrastructure side has been slow.
Should we use a boost, a letter or a call from student commissioners or would be helpful?
Potentially, I mean, the stance from EM, it seems has been, it's prioritized acquisition, that type of work prior to moving forward
That's what
on.
we're hearing too.
I would say that, not yet, because they have set deadlines and we've met those deadlines and I think we're moving things along. Everybody would like everything faster, and we all like for everything faster. But if it gets to that point, we will certainly raise the flag and say, hey, this is stalled. So like, what can we do?
Just curious, like if there's other potential funding sources that are coming that might be quicker, are we open to looking at those if, there's grants? So we're not tied to funding it to this, like we've done this because this is,
All three of these are like, I don't want to wait for all these federal dollars.
okay.
So I'm out there tapping every resource we can find. Because none of that is disaster funding. Well, microgrid things kind of, yes, but
These projects, we're not necessarily the public assistance PA, and so we don't have to worry about supplanting.
Okay.
right.
That's where we get kind of tentative about using other sources, if it's gonna supplant like a PA project. But in this space, like, have at it.
So that's update on the current battery projects, a little information on some stuff we've kind of got in the pipeline right now. Any other further questions or discussions about those specifically?
Quick question, so I don't know if we have this presentation in our inbox, I'd like to be able to reference it. Sure.
It'll be posted on our county website, we also post it to you guys.
Thank you. And then, is this a presentation you'd be willing to give to community groups if requested?
I'm willing to do whatever you guys tell me to do. And that's, you guys pay me to do that, so.
I don't know. I'm not gonna say
Which
that.
community group? How many?
We got some crazy ideas that counting to four is not hard, so.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm happy to show up wherever you guys feel is like relevant. If for any reason I think that it's maybe not the best idea, I'll tell you. I mean, I'll be honest with you up front about it, and I'll do it anyway because you guys asked. But yeah, I'm happy to share the progress that we've made. I mean, I'm very proud of this project, so I'm happy to talk to you.
It's good to tell the story, I've been in this meeting a couple times when folks have asked questions about specifically how this office is funded and how it compares to other offices. What's interesting that I want to share is a lot of the work that Jeremiah and Jackie do gets funded through like our CIP or other line items in our budget. And so you may not see all that, but there's still a ton of work that's happening. So all the solar work that you're going to see here in a minute that Jeremiah's going to talk to, you wouldn't look in the sustainability office budget necessarily see that, but certainly millions of dollars outlay capital. So
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we do get that question, like, we look at the sustainability office budget, and it seems kind of small. Well, that's because my operating budget isn't that big, because when I ask to do a project, it's a capital expenditure, so it goes through that process. So you have to look in a different place, right? And we're going to talk about that. We made some real significant investments in the time that I've been doing this job. In the last 6 years, we've invested a lot, and I'm about to show you, and actually, it's worked out pretty well too. And don't let me forget about your question.
Oh, I won't.
Okay.
We should definitely do a revolving fund.
Does anybody know if the Duke Energy's request for commercial behind the meter rooftop solar battery rebate was approved by the Utilities Commission?
Wait, so
The power carrier program.
The commercial power.
program was not been approved yet. We anticipate approval in March.
Okay, I used too many words to ask that question.
Okay, it's likely gonna involve power share storage.
Okay, because to Drew's question, like, I think, if we're gonna go on the road with anything, like, if we have a rebate program from Duke and CPACE, and then these great examples of projects that are actually saving us money like that. Those three things combined are like a great story to tell businesses that they can
Yeah,
actually,
put it together.
put all those,
Yeah.
those things together.
We're gonna talk about CPACE a little bit too.
Yeah, we just,
Yeah,
or will on Tuesday.
so we've had a lot of questions over the last few months about all the solar projects, right? Everybody wants to know how much money we spend on solar, how much money we're saving on solar, all that stuff. And we have made significant investments in the last, 5-6 years on solar. And it's a really great story to tell. That said, it is a much more complex story to tell than I think a lot of people realize. So when we talk about the impacts of solar, there are a lot of things I want you to realize that we have to consider, right? First and foremost is utility rate structures and tariff changes over the last 5 or 6 years. Peak pricing and time of use have changed significantly for folks that install solar, both residentially and commercially. And it significantly impacts the economics of solar, right? Electricity costs since 2020 have gone up approximately 22%. Natural gas has gone up even more since 2020. When we talk about our buildings as like a portfolio of buildings, like we have a lot. So the schools, we have to realize too that like they use a lot of natural gas equipment. So solar only does so much. It doesn't change the fact that they have natural gas boilers.
Just a quick question,
Yes, please.
electricity up around 22%, is that our usage or that is our
That is the-
cost?
Sorry, great question. It is the cost.
Cost,
It
okay,
is
thank
the
you.
cost of electricity. There's actually a report on that. The governor tasked like an energy policy group, and they just came out with their findings like 2 days ago. So that's the most recent sort of estimate. That number is actually a lot harder to nail down than you think because there are so many different rate structures. But as a general rule, that is what electricity costs have gone up since 2020.
And they're slated to go up again in 27, right?
There'll be another request, and I mean, they'll go up every year. They go up every year. That's what electricity costs do. Again, natural gas rate increases, natural gas equipment is still very, very prevalent in our buildings, in schools, in everybody's buildings, right? So solar doesn't have an impact when you use natural gas as your primary heating source. So, I mean, it does, it's minimal. Facility operations, we don't control what schools do with their buildings. So we can put solar on a school, but we can't make them do their set points in a certain way or control how they do their things. We also need to recognize that schools in particular are not even occupied when solar is performing at its best, right? In June, July, August, when solar is at its peak, those buildings are empty.
We
Not
should
every
put
one
our
of
kids
them.
in school in summer, you're right.
I did not say that.
You can vote on that.
No voting today, no voting today.
Jeremiah,
Those spaces have to be conditioned.
Yes.
It's a good.
Elementary
use for-
schools are typically not because they are shut down for the summer.
They're not conditioned at all.
They
It's
have-
very, very minimal.
You'd have mold nightmare.
Yeah, it's very, very minimal.
Right.
So aren't you returning the extra to the grid, get money for that?
We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
Yes,
So
we're gonna get to that.
one thing, Jeremiah, if there's something that we see that you think if we could encourage the schools that would help, just, let me know, because it's certainly
Sure.
something we can talk about in school capital,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely, and it's not meant to say the schools aren't doing their job, they're doing great, There are just things that we have less control over. And again, I have a really positive story to tell you guys, I just want to let you know that there are a lot of factors in determining, like.
Reveal, give us the truth.
I'm gonna hit this button real slow. So, this is a really, really positive thing, right? We've spent over $13 million on solar since 2020.
Yeah.
Through the Duke rebate program, that doesn't exist anymore, but it did at the time, we've received about $2.3 million in rebates. I basically took all of the rebates for the entire state. That program sat underutilized. They had a nonprofit like bucket that sat underutilized, and I basically took all of it. And so, yeah, there were some people very upset with us, but I was like, I don't care. It's been there 2 years, nobody's using it, it's ours. So we basically we maxed out our rebates, which is fantastic. And then of course the IRA came along, which was great. It doesn't help us anymore, but it did at the time. Not all of our projects were installed in a timely manner that made it like where we could apply for rebates, but for everything we could, we did. And so we're looking at, it's a lot of money here. Another 1.1 million in 23, 500,000 in 24, and we've got projects in 25 that could be another 100 grand. So we're looking at a total sort of rebate or incentive of about $3.8 million out of that 13.2 that we spent. As you can imagine, that really helps the economics, right? Like they were economical before, but with those rebates, that's a huge deal for us. Some of it is still pending. We're waiting on a couple of checks, but we expect to get them. So county buildings, we're going to talk about portfolios because we did this for county buildings, we did this for AV Tech, we did this for city schools and county schools, and we're talking about these portfolios each separately. So it's important to note, like, what's the percentage of our buildings that actually have solar? In the county, we have 18 solar projects out of 44 buildings that we have. That essentially is just because solar didn't either make sense for that particular building for a number of reasons, or maybe it needed a new roof. I mean, who knows why? Could be a million reasons. But 18 buildings out of 44. When we look at the most recent year of solar production, we've got about 1,500 megawatt hours. Bob, to your earlier point, out of that 1,500 megawatt hours, we sold back about 400 megawatt hours. So anytime solar is overproducing what's needed in the moment, that goes back onto the grid. That happens most often in that May, June, July, August time period, right? I will say that what you sell back to the grid has very little value, like financially. Duke does not give you a retail rate. They give you the avoided cost rate, which is way lower than what you pay. So you might pay, let's say, 12, 15 cents a kilowatt hour, depending on the time of day. When you're selling it back, you get 3.5 cents, right? So that's another piece of why the economics. Yeah, I mean, they don't want you doing that. I mean, or they don't want to pay you for it. And that's okay. That's a long-standing argument about net metering. It is what it is. We can't change that. But it does, again, it makes the numbers very difficult to nail down because how much was being charged depending on what time of day it was, when did you sell it back, how much did you get at that time? It's really hard to nail down a very exact number for how much the value of the solar is, but we can get pretty darn close. So if we look at our solar value based on what we sold back and what we generated, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $125,000 to $140,000 of value for the solar that we have on that 18 county buildings. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Is that
Per year.
Okay.
Per year.
Yes, this is an annual look at it, like 2025, basically. And of course, we didn't just do it for the money. We also wanted to know what are those environmental impacts, and that's about 1,000 metric tons of CO2 avoided, right? Which is great. You can also see on the right there, those are county buildings, and we can look at the amount of electricity procured over the last few years and see that we're procuring less, right? So we're buying a little bit less, we're generating a little bit more solar, and our electricity costs are pretty flat, which is great when you go back and think about the 22% rate increase, right? Our electricity costs have maintained a relatively flat thing, which is great considering costs can go up, but we're staying relatively flat. That 125K-ish, we don't use the term cost savings because it's really cost avoidance, right? But for solar, we would have paid more, but it's not like we've got a check for $125,000 that we can put in the bank, right? We saved money, sort of, but it's really just avoiding having paid more. Does that make sense?
And on the graph,
Yes,
with the procured electricity, solar generation electricity cost. Is that graph just based on the 18 buildings?
that's based on the entire portfolio.
Okay,
Is that right?
that's even more impressive if that's based on the entire portfolio, that is balanced out our electricity cost.
Yeah, and again, it's just electricity. As a portfolio, our overall utility costs keep going up because natural gas has gone up, water's gone up, and, you know, we built more stuff, and so we have more buildings. But we're talking about electricity, because that's what solar impacts, right?
I love this chart because it really tells the story quantifiably. Like, we're seeing decreased usage, increased solar, and holding our costs flat. But it kind of gets the story that we kind of hear frequently, well, like, show me like where the actual save, like where's the cost savings? Like, it's like a criticism. And the reality is it's complicated. When the cost per unit is going up, it's hard to show true savings. But here we can clearly show that we stay flat, which is that cost avoidance. And that's the business case for doing this. So.
That's right. That's right.
Speaking of electricity prices going up because of natural gas prices going up, how are tell me about this pie graph on the bottom left, how is that measured?
So it's just a total consumption
Okay.
of all county facilities, most of which comes from natural gas, right?
Yeah.
Our total consumption of power, a huge percentage of it, again, because we have natural gas boilers in all of our big buildings. If you look at the jail, those are natural gas. Natural gas is a huge part of our portfolio in terms of our total energy usage. And then we've got electricity, which, you know, is another huge chunk of it, and only about 6% of it is solar.
But that's not dollars, that's measured by something, as an energy percentage.
Yeah, we converted like
Okay.
BTUs to kilowatt hours.
Gotcha, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So because they're therms versus kilowatt, it's a whole thing. We can get in the weeds about that.
That was just my question.
Yeah, we have to convert everything to a single unit, even though they're different types of electricity, or different types of energy.
When we think about the boilers of the schools or like this building, I know our new buildings were constructed as all electric.
Correct.
I guess what's in the deep dark cobwebs of your brain, what's kind of the plan to reduce that royal blue, that pie graph?
We have to replace where we can, but we can't. We're not really in a position to do so when, like, the useful life of the equipment has a significant cycle left. So, for example, there's a fairly new boiler at 35 that we spend $200 and some odd $1,000 on. Can't pull that out for an electric boiler. Number one, because you have to change the entire infrastructure of the building to do
It
that.
lasts forever, it lasts probably longer than they.
And boilers last a really long time. So it's a huge challenge. There's no question it's a huge challenge, but where opportunities do present themselves and we have the opportunity to look at like an equipment swap because something does come to the end of life, you know, that's where we have to weigh that cost benefit.
We really need to lean in on new buildings. Existing buildings, like the economics were really bad.
Really bad.
And so just being practical with you.
Yeah.
But new buildings, which those come about every now and then, like we prioritize those.
Yeah.
Something I want to, you don't have to touch on it here, Jeremiah, but talking about the business case for selling back to the grid and why that, how it's changed our thinking related to batteries when you get to it, just make sure to talk about
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, I want to talk about that a lot, actually.
that. Yeah.
It's very important. So this is our county portfolio. Any questions before I move on to AV Tech?
This is great.
AV Tech, again, you're going to see basically the same information on each portfolio. We're just going to,
So you own
Knock
all
it
the
out.
buildings at AV
we don't own them, but we put solar on. So
We pay their power bills.
we pay the power bills for Franklin County Schools, Asheville City Schools, and AV Tech. We don't fund staff or anything like that necessarily, but we fund their construction, and we hold their debt, and we pay the power bills.
Okay.
So the county does all that, so we put solar on everything we could.
You own the school buildings.
No, we don't own the school buildings.
Oh, okay.
We just pay their bills.
Fun.
So that relationship,
And we pay for them to be built and we pay for them to be repaired. So, but like,
Okay, so
We
it's
do
a,
everything, but we don't.
But,
It's a
okay, so
really
I'm just,
close kind of.
my understanding is right, there's just a technical glitch of ownership, okay.
Yeah, we don't, when we own it until it's finished being built, we hand it off. It's, yeah, it's,
Strange.
it is strange. I've never really understood it, I just know that's what it is. But because we pay their bills, we have that direct sort of like,
Sorry.
we need to do these on these buildings too. And frankly, we just leverage if nothing else, right? So AB Tech, 7 out of 18 buildings had solar, production of about 987,000 kilowatt hours for those 7 buildings. Again, value of solar in $140,000 to $160,000 a year range, and 660-ish metric tons of CO2 avoided. Again, you can see on the right there, the solar production is slightly going up, that's the smaller one on the bottom, and then utility electricity usage slightly trending downward over the last few years. Again, direct correlation to having installed these systems. Again, I would say that that is a cost avoidance rather than a cost savings. But as you see, again, only 7 of 18 buildings, so that bottom left there, the light blue is, they're sort of the percentage of solar out of their total electricity bill. So while it's making a difference for sure, only 7 out of 18 buildings, and so there's definitely still a lot of usage there. We don't have as much data on our partners as we do on ourselves, obviously. We have a lot more granular data on our own buildings than I do on our partner facilities.
Just one question to make sure I understand this. So the estimate of the solar value, is that specifically what we're selling back? Or is that actually also including this savings in the electricity reduction?
It's both.
It is both.
It's both.
Okay, so that value is taken both into account.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we're trying to sort of estimate the total value
Okay.
of so that includes what we produce on site, and what goes into the building in the moment, and then what gets sold back to the community.
Okay, thank you.
Jeremiah said it earlier, but it's an estimate because it's complicated. Like, we don't literally know what the unit cost was at this moment in time. Like, we have to build a model to that extent. It changes every minute of every day.
It does. It's kind of ridiculous. Like the cost changes from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 9 a.m. to 11, it's different. From 11 to 4, it's different. And from 4 to 1 in the morning, it's different. It's complicated. I will say, without trying to overpromise anything, we're trying to build a model to get more precise with these estimates. So that's AB Tech. County schools, again, because we're running out of time. 12 out of 45 buildings, so smaller percentage of their overall portfolio. 25-ish%, I guess, their overall portfolio we put solar on. In 2025, that was about 4,200 megawatt hours. Those systems are pretty darn big on some facilities, and so we're looking at $300,000 to $325,000 in potential solar value there, with about 2,800 metric tons of CO2 avoided. What you see on the bottom there is just sort of an example of one of those schools. That's North Windy Ridge, for those of you who recognize the building. And again, that's typical solar production throughout a year. It's pretty steady, it's pretty consistent. And we do these initial analysis before we actually even install a thing, where we estimate what we expect the production to be throughout the year. And we're very happy to say that all of these have been almost right on target, 95% to 110%, of what we expected them to be able to produce. So that's county schools. This is Asheville City Schools. It's 4 out of their 8 buildings. It will be 5. Lucy Herring didn't get finished until very late June, July of 2025, so it's not a part of this one yet. But that production is in the 1,400 megawatt hour range. Again, $100,000 to $115,000 a year in value of solar, and almost 1,000 metric tons of CO2. That's Asheville High.
Lucy Herring installation was completed calendar year 2025.
Yeah, it's one of the ones we'll be trying to apply for, the IRA. Yeah, Lucy Herring, if you guys remember, I'm sure you heard, it was a big thing. That whole school went under a major renovation. So one of the things was a new roof. So we're like, well, gotta wait till that's done. So it didn't get finished until the summer of 25. So we try not to give you data on solar particularly until we've had a full year of going through all the seasons, because it really is just a better picture. So yeah, anyway, that's city schools. And, sorry, I thought somebody said something. Terry, this one's for you. So we've had a lot of questions about fire departments, right? So again, we don't have a ton of data on fire departments because a lot of those have not been installed for all that long. None of them have been installed for a year yet. But what we can do with fire departments is go look at their production and make sure that it is where we thought it was going to be, right? We estimated X number of, kilowatt hours a month, a year, et cetera, and it's right on target. Every one of them, with the exception of West Buncombe, and that was for a specific reason. It had some optimizers that were faulty and had to get replaced. But the installer that we used to do these systems went out of business. And so, yeah, literally the day that they finished, they were like, final invoice, here you go. By the way, we're closing up shop.
Who's that?
Eagle Solar and Light. Unfortunately, they're not alone. That's, the economics of solar with the reduction of the tax credits and things there's a lot of solar developers that are struggling. But what we can do again is go look at what did we estimate the production would be for these systems? What are they currently producing during the time that they have it operational? And they're all right on the money, either at or above what we expected. So again, we can look at what we estimate the sort of value of that solar to be. But Terry, I think one of the things that's really important, and I think we can message this to the fire chiefs, is that this critical peak rate structure that Duke has implemented is very punitive to folks who install solar. So the short version is that 6 to 9 a.m. winter peak time, they have gotten to a place where the rates during just that 3-hour period are like 4 to 5 times what they are any other time of day. They've quadrupled and more, and in some cases it's 16 times higher.
I got a $250 power bill the other day.
Yes, and it's because, it's nuts.
I have solar.
So even if you have solar, because 6 to 9 a.m. solar's not kicking yet, right? It's barely getting going by 9 o'clock. The rate structure is very punitive to solar. I think what you will see is that will balance itself throughout the year, because number one, that peak time changes. But it's still, you'll be seeing the benefits a lot more in that like May, June, July, August timeframe. But during those really cold winter months, like January was brutal. The bills are going to be high. It doesn't mean that solar's not doing its job. It doesn't mean that the value's not there on whole, but it does mean that in certain months, it's going to feel punitive if you install solar.
Your
Because
system just producing less.
Because you're producing less, because January is like the worst month for solar. December is not great either. And at the time when you're using the most electricity, when you're heating it up in the morning, the rates have skyrocketed. And then they drop around 11 o'clock, right when solar really starts peaking. And so it's not a great story to tell. Again, overall the value is still there. The environmental benefit is still there. But on certain months of the year, the bill is going to look pretty awful. I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard.
More justification for storage.
Yes, that's.
Yeah, but it takes
You're
big
getting
storage.
to where I'm going.
I have a battery in my house, I can tell you, it runs out in the winter time.
By 11.
By 11 at night, at night. You know, actually, in December and January, it runs out at about 7 at night.
So from the point of view of the fire departments though, right, like they didn't, we paid for this.
Mhm.
They didn't have to pay for it. And now, I mean, average, let's just say they're saving 300 a month, right?
Yeah, in some instances, yeah. Again,
So I mean,
it's
it's a win, it's a win for them.
It's a win for
regardless.
them. It's just it's a more challenging story to tell because they're not used to seeing those January bills. But those January bills are for everybody. I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard this. You work in the utility. Like everybody's going, oh my God, my bill last month. I have solar and storage in my house and my January bill was awful. You know, it's a function of the structure of the way the rates are structured. Again, it doesn't mean the value's not there, doesn't mean the environmental benefit is not there. But it's a challenge to like tell that story to somebody who doesn't live in this world like I do.
Sure.
It is still better
Yes.
because of the solar
Yes.
than it would have been otherwise. And I think
Yes.
that's an important story to tell.
Yes.
January's bad, but if I compare to my neighbors, I'm singing.
I don't know, the
Correct.
president said it was a scam, so I don't know.
Is the commercial power pair program proposed, will it work as a battery only, or is it be battery plus?
They can work as batteries now.
It can be batteries.
So these would be decent candidates for that.
Yeah,
Rebate
eventually,
program.
I would love to see small customers like this enroll in that program.
And overall, because one of the questions I get on our overall solar investment is kind of that return on investment. And so when you look at all of this, I know you didn't.
Oh, I'm gonna recap for you.
Oh, you are, okay, good. I was doing that, Chris, I think you doing that now.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Hey, summary.
Very good.
Yes, I thought you might go there, right? Actually, Tim thought you might go there, so he said, put us on my slide. So if you look at our total investment, 13.2, our total rebates, 3.8, total net cost, 9.4. The estimated value that I told you guys about is in that $700,000 range. Again, it's an estimate, it's a range, but it's about $700K, which means that ROI is about 13 years. I went back, and I don't think, maybe Tim. I don't know if anybody else in the room was even around when I pitched these solar projects to the Board of Commissioners in like 2019, I think. And I went just for grins. I was like, I want to go look back at that proposal I sent, like the presentation I did for the board back then. And that's it on the right. And
I can figure it out.
I know, I
14.
apologize for that.
Your guess was
You mean
14
your
years.
presentation on whether to do solar at all?
Yes,
Like your initial pitch is beat it by a year.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's dope.
yeah,
No skeptics in the room at all.
yeah,
I think I was in the audience.
yeah.
13 years old.
5.
That's cool.
So that initial one didn't include some of the projects that we did after the big giant round of solar we did up front. And it didn't include IRA benefits, which is really what drove it down another year. But I was like tickled pink to see that. I was like, oh my God, I was right. I did the math right, is all that really mattered. I didn't do anything.
Cost of PV.
But we did the math right. And these systems are doing exactly what we said they would do.
And the
And
life,
that's the big picture.
and the lifespan of these 20, 30?
Typically 30 years plus.
30 years plus, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The warranties on panels tend to run anywhere to 20, 25 years. But they keep working. There's very few moving parts. So there's not a lot that breaks. You have to replace inverters in 15 years, things like that, but it's.
And the savings of the fire departments is actually on top of these.
Correct.
Your summary. So
Yeah,
I mean, I
correct.
know that's not our actual, well, and I mean, the taxpayers are paying that. So when we look at the
100%.
taxpayer funding, that actually increases.
Yeah, it does. It does. The fire departments are small, so it's a smaller piece, but it all adds up. So I'm just really excited. I'm thrilled to say that like these systems are doing exactly what we said they would do. It's been a real learning curve. Last 5 years has been quite a roller coaster ride for a lot of reasons. But it's really a positive story to tell, to say that like we wanted to make these investments for the right reasons, and they're they're all functioning with a few random like hiccups here and there, and like they're doing what we said they were gonna do. And again, all of this is avoided cost for us, right? But for solar, we'd be paying a lot more.
If you're like, I think the installation cost of one of these average fire station projects is for a battery, would be what, $20,000?
Well, it would depend on whether or not it's a single phase or three-phase power system. A lot of them are single phase.
Yeah.
Single phase is pretty easy comparatively, because you can do like a Tesla Powerwall.
Yeah.
On a single phase site, which would be 15 to 30 grand, whether or not you want to do one or two, depending on how much storage you want. If it's a three-phase system, that's more like commercial grade, probably closer to like 60 to 80,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what's the proposed commercial power rebate rates?
I mean,
Not willing to say being
I mean,
recorded.
it was filed as $120 per kW of roll capacity
Yeah.
of storage. Then you get $30 extra per kW if you have PV, and that means 25% of the capacity of the battery. So,
Okay, well, I mean, that sounds good.
yeah, it's
If
worthwhile.
it's approved.
It's gonna be approved.
It'll be approved, yeah.
I mean, that plus the tax rebate sounds
It's,
like it would pencil pretty good.
Yeah. We learned a lot over the last several years. We did this aggregated procurement. We did 47 solar projects all at once. I never want to do that again. That was so much work, and it was so crazy. I think it saved us money in the bid phase. But I think overall,
The biggest one we did.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the minute you have a change order, you got a change order for 47 projects.
Hmm.
So we had one change order that was $600,000. And that kind of blew the savings that we made. So I don't know that we saved a lot by doing this sort of large scale aggregated procurement. Ultimately, it was a concept, and we tried it, and I have no regrets at all because we got a whole bunch of solar installed. It was awesome. But yeah, I don't know that I'm gonna do it again. I liked it. That's why I did 2 battery projects. I didn't ask you guys for 70. But I would say that that was an interesting lesson learned. I would say the utility rate structure changes. It's a constant change, right? It's this ever evolving thing. It's pretty consistently working to undermine folks that install solar. And that's leading to the third bullet point, which is I don't want to install solar ever again without a battery. I think that they have to go together. Number one, it's the most economical based on rate structures, right? Because then you can offset that peak usage by taking the solar that you've overproduced, storing it, and using it when you need it. But the other thing that we've learned, and this is a pretty hard lesson, honestly, is that if you've already installed solar and you want to retrofit a battery to it after the fact, it's not economical. If you want the battery to charge from excess solar, you have to restring the solar. You have to basically undo it and redo it all, and it blows the economics of it out of the water.
Can you do battery storage ready?
Not really. Not really. We are working, there's new technologies all the time. We are working on these potential hybrid inverters that might help resolve some of these issues. But what we have found out at East Asheville Library, I'll give the most recent example. At East Asheville Library, we got bids to add a battery. We're like, well, we want the battery to charge from solar, right? We don't want it to just charge from the grid and only the grid, because that's actually it can be economical in terms of shaving demand and stuff, but it's actually increasing your overall utility consumption because it's only charging from the grid and nowhere else. Just the restringing part to make the battery charge from solar was $100,000. So the economics of that project, well, that doesn't make any sense, right? It's not good to do that.
Restring, it was wired in series and it could be parallel or vice versa, I don't understand.
So right now, all of the strings are led to inverters, right?
Oh, there's a string inverter, not micro inverters on the library.
on virtually all of them. And so the strings have to be rerouted essentially to the battery and the hybrid inverter on the battery. That process is very labor intensive.
Yeah, it is.
And
Was
so-
it from each panel?
Yes, well, from each string of panels, yes, yes. So it's, I don't think it's a story that gets told enough, honestly, in our little circles. It's not like, wow, that's expensive and challenging.
3 phases.
Yeah.
That's a three-phase project, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah. And so, you know, my stance on this moving forward is that if we're gonna do solar on anything, we need to do storage simultaneously. And set it up right from the jump, because we'll significantly benefit from doing this. I don't wanna have to do this retrofit stuff afterwards. And it's a bit disappointing because we have so much installed solar. Again, it doesn't change the value that I just showed you. But it does mean that, like, again, when we overproduce, we sell back to the grid. We prefer to keep it and use it, right? Like, that's the most beneficial thing to do. But it's, again, these are lessons, because 5 years ago too, the battery storage world was a very different world. Way more expensive, a lot fewer people were doing it. Even today, there's so few people that have manufacturers, battery manufacturers, that have a product that fits in that mid-sized commercial space, right? We don't need a megawatt of battery storage, 10 megawatts of battery storage, and we don't need the Tesla Powerwall, right? Because that's a single phase more for residential. That middle ground where it's like a 3-phase mid-sized facility, there's like 2 battery manufacturers that even make those. So it's still a developing market. And I think, you know, we're gonna continue to grow with it. You know?
Look, that's the other great thing I was just telling whispering to Maggie is that, look, governments and government generally should be the ones that are deploying more of these. Because it is the kind of Goldilocks size battery between residential and utility scale that
Yeah,
if we deploy more of, we'll learn how to do it, and cost will go down.
that's exactly.
Somebody needs to take that risk, and so we're doing a public service.
Yeah, I think so, and I you know, I mean, I think Buncombe County in particular is really kind of into the spirit of a lot of this stuff. We are leading in this space, and I'm happy to say that. But it also means we like our, you know, when you're out front, you also, when you trip, like, you know, it's like, it's real obvious, right? Like we're gonna be constantly learning and growing, and figuring out how to do it better.
What type of maintenance and repair implications are there from these batteries?
Maintenance and repair, none yet. It's still pretty new. I will say we had a learning curve of getting them set up,
Right.
and optimized, and sort of programmed correctly so that they're doing that graph with the, you know, showing shading peak and all that stuff, so that they're doing it the way we needed it to. But no maintenance issues.
I guess the inquiry comes from learning from the city's experience where we were tipping the spear on electric buses.
Mhm.
And then the volatility in that market, the manufacturer went out of business, and
Yep.
we've been really out over our skis
Yeah,
because
definitely.
we don't have the partner necessary on the technology side. A bus is a very different and differently complex thing than that. But I think it's just always an important caution when mission-oriented institutions invest to like propel the market forward. It came with a lot of risk for us when that company went out of business.
Yeah, we try to mitigate that as best we can through our contracting process and our requirements for like workmanship warranty and things like that. But then, you know, we do that,
We did that too.
and
They went
then
out
a
of
solar
business.
developer goes out of business.
Yeah, exactly. And we
You're like,
also, we invested early in CNG, compressed natural gas, and
Yeah.
started running into like those businesses weren't around. We became a really big maintenance headache and all the bits and pieces. So there might be something to consider as you're looking at this in a long-term picture of securing any of those savings for future unanticipated consequences for just emerging technology. I wish we had done that with both of those when we went to the spear on those, and we didn't, and it might cause you guys some, save some headaches in the future financially.
I'm hopeful, and this is me speaking my opinion, I'm hopeful battery storage isn't going away. And
I said that about these two
because the utility itself has found the value, right? The utility is asking people to install this and creating incentives for people to install this.
Utilities in America agree on, so they want batteries.
Yeah, so my hope there is that like, if that market is telling people to do this and providing incentives for people to do this, like, it ain't going anywhere. But everything has ups and downs, and, you know.
Getting rid of the.
Yeah, and it's not just that, like, other bus companies, they're all,
Yeah, because
there's, nobody's doing it. Yes, nobody's doing it.
Well, look at the contract that we had with the company for the fire departments, right? Was there anything in there that,
So, yeah, that's a good question. We had a workmanship warranty and all the things that we do to protect ourselves. But
okay,
again, they closed their doors. So what we're doing now, we're going back and trying to get the bond company. Because they have to provide a
Right.
bond, right? It's a payment bond. We're going to the bond company
okay,
and saying, we got a workmanship warranty issue here. West Buncombe, for
Right.
example, like had some optimizers out. I had to pay out of pocket to go get those fixed,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't a ton of money, but it shouldn't be on us.
Right.
It should be
Yeah.
that company paying for it. And since they had a bond, we're working on getting that bond company. What I'd like to do with the world is get that bond company to like pay for a 5-year operation and maintenance contract, and just have a local developer on call to go fix stuff if stuff breaks. But that is TBD, because we're going through the attorneys and trying to figure that part out.
are we able to put some kind of safety net in for future contracts or stuff in case that happens to us again? Or is there really no legal way to kind of put that in the contract that if you go out of business, you are required X?
Yeah, I think Jeremiah underscored it with the bond, and there's a certain point where you can only chase so far, right? And the thing I would say, we should be thinking about operations maintenance, potential faults, all of that. I just want us to think of it evenly. I think too often we say, well, we can't do batteries because they're gonna catch on fire and like, we'll be able to put the fire out. And like, that isn't really fair. Like, we have defects all the time with normal technology like boilers or, you know, gas propelled engines. And we don't talk about it in the same way, like there's this mass risk. We should just assume that there's some maintenance and defects that occur over time and plan for it in our budgets, we do. But I don't mean to say that we shouldn't taking those precautions, I just also want us to be measured internally as we're evaluating.
Any modern battery manufacturer, like their primary focus is on fire protection, safety, like they'll be like, oh, we've got like 150 million cells in the field, and like we haven't had one failure, you know, like it's
Yeah.
crazy.
I'm not concerned about the batteries.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the fact that we had this company do all this work. They went out of business right after they got the check from us, and then now we're gonna be out the expenses. That's the part I would.
Yeah, I totally agree. I will say, like, one of the things we're also trying to do is train our internal staff on, like, so that we can build some in-house capacity that we've got some expertise. Like, I'm not a solar technician, right? I'm not certified to go out. I'll kill myself if I touch anything that's got electricity running through it. But we have in-house electricians, so let's send them to a class where they can get certified to do operation and maintenance on PV. Let's get trained up so that we've got some in-house capacity to handle some of these things ourselves, right? So we're not reliant, because at some point, workmanship warranties end regardless, right? So we want some in-house expertise, and that's something we're kind of kicking back and forth in training and development of our own stuff.
Sounds good.
Terry, we also have been taking risk management pretty seriously, like this Eagle Solar thing.
Yeah.
Really was a pretty big blow. However, there was a construction bond. So we are now filing a claim against the construction bond to ensure that the county doesn't suffer any losses as a result of this. So I think that risk mitigation, in addition to internal controls, are really gonna kind of save expenses if and when it's possible, so.
Thank you.
It's not easy to get
Right.
out there.
We done?
I got
Any announcements?
one thing. One quick, this is quick and painless. Just wanted to share this. So on March 18th, we are co-hosting a workshop here in this building on the first floor. We're trying to get the word out through, Commerce and some of our other partners to local businesses that might be interested. We'll be co-hosting a workshop with the city and with the economic development folks that are the state administrator for CPACE. So that's all. It's just
Who is a really good, help us understand like good target audience for us with outreach? Who do you think would be,
It's
who would benefit?
a great question. Anybody, I think multifamily developers are a good target audience. I think any commercial developer, but also, commercial businesses. So Amy, who came and spoke to you guys, Amy is a commercial developer. But, what she's using this for is recovery, right? So commercial businesses that were impacted by a lien that needed to rebuild, this is a tool to potentially recover some of those costs.
Yeah.
Because that's what she's actually
Yeah, so what I was just wondering then, like through our affordable housing, like getting that out, they've got a list of developers, right, that we work with. TDA, if you send it to me, I can send that, ask Dick to send that out to everybody, on the hoteliers and everything. That's a beneficial group. Just to help build the awareness and make sure, not assuming that everybody hears about it, right, but like really making sure we.
It's a tool in the toolbox, so why shouldn't people at least know that it's there?
Right.
Absolutely.
New Belgium's looking at it, there's those new heat pump that creates steam and we're using it at Colorado brewery.
Oh,
So
that's
it's the
cool.
same expenses and.
They're looking at using this.
Yeah.
I think this has potential to be a really good success story.
The other announcement is that the solid waste team has set a date for the compost processing facility ribbon cutting. And that's April 15th at 10:30. Dane said he'll send out an invitation for everyone. And then the rain date is April 17th at 10. So
April
15th at 10:30.
You'll send out an invitation to our.
Yeah, it'll come from solid waste.
Yeah, thank you all.
And
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.